Hi everyone, welcome to Kinesiology 2030. Today's lecture is going to be on sleep. I decided to incorporate sleep on its own instead of embedding it into embracing health and wellness for a couple of reasons. First off, when I was going through post-secondary education at both the undergraduate and graduate level in kinesiology, in sports science, not once did I have a lecture on sleep. Not once did we take an hour or two and talk about the importance of sleep. So I decided that I'm going to do that in our kinesiology program. I'm going to give the students of Langara a lecture on sleep so you can understand the importance of it. And the reason why I want to do that is because I think college students need to understand, because you guys are starting to get at the age where sleep is starting to decrease, and you need to understand the importance of what you need in terms of sleep. The second reason I want to give this lecture is because of a passage that I read in one of my favorite books. It's called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. This passage here is one of the reasons why I have really started looking into sleep. So I'm going to read this to you now so you can hear it and maybe get a little understanding of why we're doing this lecture. So he starts off chapter 6, which is Your Mother and Shakespeare Knew, the benefits of sleep for the brain. He has this warning set out into it. And the warning is amazing breakthrough. Scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. It enhances your memory and makes you more creative. It makes you look more attractive. It keeps you slim and it lowers food cravings. It protects you from cancer and dementia. It wards off colds and flu. It lowers your risk of heart attack and stroke, not to mention diabetes. You'll even feel happier, less depressed, and less anxious. Are you interested? So what essentially he is talking about is sleep. All of that amazing breakthrough is sleep. Now, if that warning or that came out as amazing breakthrough and it was some sort of pill, everyone would be trying to get that pill. But the fact is, we all have access to that, and it's in sleep. So what we're going to do today essentially is talk about what is happening to the body when it's sleeping, why it's important, what are the barriers that we have that decrease our sleep ability. We're also going to talk about some tips that you can give yourself or others to help improve their sleep. I personally value sleep more than any aspect of physical health. I would sacrifice exercise over a good night's sleep. I would sacrifice nutrition over a good night's sleep because I understand what's happening to my mind and body while I'm sleeping. And that's what I want you to understand. So as kinesiologists or health professionals moving on into the profession, you can value it too, and you can help educate people on the value of sleep so we understand it more. All right. If you want a resource, I really suggest you read Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. That is one of the best resources to sleep. All right. It's one of the best resources to learn on sleep. I wish I can do an entire lecture on his book. All right. But I think it would be an entire course. So what we're going to do is get into sleep, talk about it, look at it, and go into exactly how we can improve our sleeping ability. So the first thing I want us to understand is when it comes to sleep, many people get as little of it as they can get away with. And almost every health professional trained today ignores sleep as a fundamental part of health. And why do I say that statement? Why do I say every health professional trained today ignores sleep as a fundamental part of health? Well, let's take one example. Doctors. If you know anything about the medical profession, when you start training to be a doctor, when you're an intern or you're a beginning doctor or you're an emergency doctor, you are expected to work 24 straight hours. That means you are expected to work through your natural cycle of sleep and stay awake and deprive yourself of one of the most important human aspects, to work. So if you ask me, that is ignoring sleep as a fundamental part of health. And I can tell you one thing: if I go into surgery, I'm going to want my doctor to value sleep. I'm going to want my doctor to have had a solid night's sleep the night before. So I think it's interesting that we have all these health professionals, all these professions that require people to essentially be up for 24 hours a day, or consistently, work 12, 16-hour shifts and give them little sleep. So to me, we need to make sure our health professionals value that. Make sure that they understand that it is a fundamental part of health. It's a fundamental part of being human. So a big part of our negligence when it comes to sleep is that we don't appreciate the benefits of optimal sleep. And optimal is the key word. Many of us are unaware of the consequences of poor sleep. We don't make the connection between poor sleep and the different diseases of civilization. The reality is that we are in fact living through an epidemic of catastrophic sleep loss. In average, humans are sleeping less now more than ever before. And in reality, we spend a third of our life asleep. But for some reason, we're trying to decrease that amount. We want more time in the day. We don't want to sleep for 7 to 8 hours a day. We only want 4 to 5 hours because we have things to do. So that's not valuing it. Also, there was a time when everyone almost made fun of people for sleeping too much. They were called lazy or unmotivated. But research is starting to show virtually every major disease is linked in some way to sleep loss or lack of quality of sleep. Do me a favor. If it's 11:30 right now at night and you just turned this lecture on and you said, I'm just going to listen to this lecture and then I'm going to go to sleep, but you're really tired, you're just going to grind through it. Do me a favor. Turn the lecture off. Watch it tomorrow. Get a good night's sleep. You'll be better for it tomorrow. Trust me. Don't sleep deprive yourself. Watch this lecture tomorrow. And that's what we need to start doing. We need to start prioritizing sleep. We need to start making the decision of, I'm not going to do this tonight. I'm going to get a good night's sleep. And I'm hoping after this lecture, every one of you will take that advice and put it into your everyday life, because you will be thankful for the benefits, the health benefits that you will get from it. So let's look at what sleep is, because in reality, a lot of us don't know what sleep is. A lot of us just go to sleep and wake up, and we just start our day. We don't even really think about it. It's just we've been doing it our entire lives. We get tired, we go to sleep, we wake up. Do we really understand what it is? Now, in the past few decades, we have uncovered an immense amount of information when it comes to sleep, at least the mysteries of sleep, but we still have a long way to go. And you can see that in the definition: a natural periodic state of rest for the mind and body in which the eyes usually close and consciousness is completely or partially lost. So there is a decrease in bodily movement and responsiveness to external stimuli during that period of time. Okay, that's the definition of sleep. But why? Why does our body go into this complete unconscious state for 7 to 9 hours a night? Why is it doing that? What's the point of it? I can find other productive things I can do. All right? So right now, the scientific gap is definitely smaller than it was, say, 10 years ago. All right? But we still haven't answered all the questions when it comes to sleep. But the one thing that we all can agree on is it's immensely important. The one reason why I think it's immensely important is because every single animal on our planet sleeps. And if we know anything about evolution, it's nature is pretty smart. So if nature is making every animal sleep, it must not be a mistake. There must be a reason for it. So let's discover what that reason is. Let's discover what sleep is, why we sleep, the importance of it. First off, if we look at sleep, if it wasn't virtually important to survival, sleep would be a huge mistake. On a daily basis, you enter this coma-like state where you can't gather food, protect yourself from danger, protect your young, or do anything for that matter. Why? What's the point? That sounds pretty dangerous. But sleep has lasted the test of times across all species despite the cost. So it must mean there's a role that plays. Must mean it's important, regardless of what danger presents itself. So if you think about way back, hunter-gatherer days, that's probably one of the most dangerous times to be a human, when you did not have food security. You had to go get your own food. You did not have security of a house. You had to build your own house or live in some sort of cave. Even though they lived in this dangerous time, they all still slept. And scientists know this because they have found evidence of sleep that goes back to the times of hunter and gatherers. So we know that they've been sleeping. And just think about that. Just think about if you are a hunter-gatherer and you had to go to sleep, but there are other predators out there. That would be a pretty scary time to sleep, yet they still would have slept. And I have a couple other interesting things to talk about when it comes to hunter and gatherers in a little bit in the stages of sleep, just to give you an idea about a couple things. But that's one of the big things I really want you to think of. Sleep should be a mistake. Going in a coma-like state should hinder our ability. But we have to do it. So that brings to the next question, in my eyes, is why do we sleep? Well, one thing I can say with 100% confidence is that sleep is essential for optimal physical, mental, emotional health, as well as repeatedly obtaining suboptimal sleep will result in adverse health effects that can manifest in multiple of ways. I could list you hundreds of diseases that are affected by poor sleep, but instead I'll just give you the ones that are most notable. The ones that are what I call diseases of civilization. And we'll talk about that term more in this course as well. So suboptimal sleep will increase your risk of heart disease, stroke, depression, cancer, Alzheimer's, obesity, type 2 diabetes. It compresses your immune system. It increases your risk for accidents. So why would we, if you look at all those diseases, why would we deprive ourselves of something that can help our body stay healthy? So when we ask that question, why do we sleep? It's a tough one because it implies that there is a single function to sleep. But in reality, the reason we sleep is immensely complex and still not completely understood. What we do know is that sleep is important, and that there is not a single organ without the body or the process in the brain that isn't optimally enhanced by sleep or impaired by the lack of it. So it's an important topic to educate the public about, to educate people in health about, to help guide people on the steps they can take to improve their sleep. So we need to make sure we understand sleep more. Now, I'm actually going to put a chapter on Brightspace from Why We Sleep for you guys to read. And it is that chapter where I started reading that first passage, chapter 6, because this part is really the easy part of understanding sleep, the risks. But I want you guys to read about the benefits to sleep. I want you to read also about how sleep can improve your studies, how sleep can improve your ability to write a test, how sleep can improve your ability to perform a skill. Because that's one thing that we don't talk about enough in kinesiology, is how when I try to learn a skill, when I get a good night's sleep, my body actually goes through processing and motor learning while I sleep to help enhance and improve that skill. So I'm going to embed that chapter into Brightspace so you can read it, so you can see the various studies that have been done on the benefits of skill acquisition, memory retention on sleep. So now the next question we need to talk about, or next part of sleep we need to talk about, is how much sleep do we need? Well, one thing we have to do is understand that even the smartest people in the world, when it comes to sleep, still struggle to answer the term of how much do we need. It's hard to give a specific number that applies to everyone, because one thing we'll learn in this course is everybody's health, everybody's wellness is individual and it's different, and our bodies are all different. So not everyone is going to need 8 hours of sleep. Not everyone's going to need 7 hours of sleep. Some people are going to need 9 hours of sleep. But essentially, on average, we go between the 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, with the average being about 8 per night being ideal. But there's one thing that we do know, and that's if you don't sleep, you will die, which is interesting because there is actual documentation events of someone who is deprived, of people who have deprived their sleep to the point where they die. All right. Also, if you sleep 1 hour less than what is ideal for you, it will result in measurable negative effects on your physical and mental health. And that's one thing that's important to note is sleep. Yes, it helps physical aspects, but we're starting to see mental health has big advantages and disadvantages when it comes to enough sleep and not enough sleep. As I mentioned, Alzheimer's, we're starting to tie Alzheimer's into lack of sleep. And there's research, strong research, that is showing that lack of sleep and sleep deprivation actually leads to Alzheimer's. And one example I can give you, and I don't know if you guys know who these two people are. You might be. They're fairly relevant historical figures. One of them was a former president of the United States. His name was Ronald Reagan. Another one was a former prime minister in England, and her name was Margaret Thatcher. Both of them prided themselves on how they only needed 4 to 5 hours of sleep a day. That's what they got, 4 to 5 hours of sleep a day. And they prided themselves on this. This is what made them great leaders. This is what got them to where they were. Both of them ended up with Alzheimer's. Both of them ended up dying of Alzheimer's. So right there, it's not scientific proof, but it's evidence that suggests that lack of sleep is going to lead to some pretty negative side effects. So when it comes to how much sleep you need each night, you have to include things like your genetics and what you do with your brain and body on a daily basis. So if we look at an example of an athlete, if you're an athlete, someone that trains 90 minutes to 2 hours a day or more, right, performs and practices daily, your body, your brain is going through a lot of different training stimuli, and that's going to increase your demand of sleep. Athletes need that 9 hours of sleep and even possibly a nap during the day to make sure that their bodies are recovering fully. So what we can safely say is that your personal sleep needs is really about what quality of sleep you're getting that allows you to feel awake, alert, and refreshed the following day. If you feel sleepy during the day, then you're likely not getting an adequate amount of sleep. Now, one question that I get a lot from people when it comes to sleep is sleep tracking. Now we have technology, smartwatches. We have this Aurora ring, which tracks heart rate and says it tracks your sleep. There's all these different sleep trackers out there that measure your heart rate while you sleep and then essentially gives you a score, a rating of what your sleep was and if you had enough sleep or not. Now, I debate if these are accurate enough to give you what you need in terms of, yes, you had enough sleep, or no, you didn't have enough sleep. And honestly, I think they're a little bit of a waste because honestly, you should be able to know if you've had enough sleep by how you feel. That's really the best sleep tracker there is, right? If you go to bed at 11 o'clock and you wake up at 7 o'clock, you had 8 hours of sleep. If you feel good during the day, you probably had enough sleep, right? If you were tired during the day, well, something's up, right? You had 8 hours of sleep, yet you still feel tired. Something's up, right? You need to figure out what that is. Not when it comes down to quality of sleep, right? So, there could be a number of factors that play in why your quality of sleep decreases. But when it comes to the sleep trackers, I've tried them all to see, and the only sleep tracking I do is I just track how many hours I got a night, and then I just do a little bit of a readiness questionnaire that just basically asks how I'm feeling. And then that gives me a rating of, do I feel good? Do I feel tired? And then I can evaluate from there. But I think these sleep trackers, the watches, the heart rate monitors, the Aurora rings, they're a little bit gimmicky, and I don't think they're going to give you accurate measurements of whether you slept enough or not. All right, the next thing we're going to go to is on the physiology of sleep. We're going to look at what exactly is happening to our sleep when we're looking at, the physiology side of things. Because I think this is important too, because this really gets into exactly what is happening when you're sleeping, is the physiology. So there's two main factors that cause us to want to sleep, and that's our circadian rhythm, as well as a chemical called adenosine. So the circadian rhythm is our natural internal process that regulates the sleep-wake cycle. So there's two factors that really are responsible for determining our wake and our sleep. So we have this 24-hour circadian rhythm, which is a natural internal process that regulates the sleep-wake cycle. And then this chemical called adenosine. Adenosine is a chemical in our brain that is responsible for something that we call sleep pressure. So essentially, the longer you've been awake, the more of this chemical is produced, and it creates this sleep pressure. So the sleep pressure is really that sleepy feeling you have. So when your eyes start getting heavy and you just want to sleep, that's sleep pressure, and that's caused by increased adenosine. So when adenosine concentrations in the brain peak, for most people it's about 12 to 16 hours of being awake, you get that serious urge to sleep. So essentially, if you look at the two charts, if you look at the first chart that says figure 5, you'll see that when our adenosine is high and our circadian rhythm is low, that is going to be when we peak for our sleep. But when the adenosine is low and the circadian rhythm is high, that's when we're going to feel awake. So that happens during the day. We have low adenosine and our circadian rhythm is rather low, creating wakefulness. But then as the day goes and that adenosine gets higher and that circadian rhythm gets lower, that sleep pressure starts to increase. And that's going to make us want to go to sleep. So you've probably heard about people who have fallen asleep while driving a car. Well, when you're driving a car, you're not moving much. Other than the car's moving, you're not, you're sitting. And when you get to that natural circadian rhythm of it's time to sleep and adenosine is high enough, your body will literally fall asleep on its own. And that's why some people fall asleep while they're driving. And obviously it's dangerous. So sleep deprivation can cause that, and just driving when you are very tired because you have high adenosine. So we need to make sure that we understand that sleep pressure, and we understand that that feeling of sleepiness is natural, and it's our body telling us, go to bed. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the sleep cycle. So this is the stages of sleep that get cycled throughout the night. So this is really what's happening while we're sleeping. So there's these 4 stages. You've probably heard of one of them, REM stage, which is rapid eye movement. But we have 3 others, which is NREM, which is non-rapid eye movement. So let's go through each stage and talk about what they are. So first, stage 1 is just stage 1 non-REM or NREM. This is when you're initially starting to drift off. So we all know what's happening around us. All right, we're still relatively conscious. All right, but we're just getting to the point of slowly drifting off. This is when we experience what's called a myoclonic jerk, or just a muscle contraction that is involuntary. So at this point, you can easily be awoken by a noise or other sensory stimuli during this stage. So that muscle jerk that you get, that usually wakes you up. A door closing, that would wake you up, because really we're still in a conscious state. But what's happening is we're just getting into eventually stage 2 of non-REM, which is the second phase. And this is when you begin to drift into a deeper sleep. We're less aware of sounds that may have woken us during stage 1, and our heart rate and our body temperature starts to drop. Right? So that heart rate and body temperature beginning to drop means our body is slowing down, and it's starting to prepare for the essential growth and repair that's about to happen. Stage 3 of non-REM sleep is when we're in a much deeper sleep stage. Now, this is actually one of the more important, probably the most important part of sleep, because this is where growth, repair, and replenishment occurs. So both physically and cognitively, we're getting repair, replenishment, and some growth taking place at this stage. Our breathing rate, blood pressure, and heart rate are all at their lowest point during this third stage. Much of our stage 3 sleep does occur earlier in the night during the first 2 sleep cycles. So that's why it's very important that we go to bed earlier so we don't miss the stage 3. In the survey that I put out for you guys, one of the questions I asked was, when do you go to sleep? Is it 10? Is it 11? Is it 12? Is it 1? Well, if you're going to bed after 12, you are actually decreasing the amount of stage 3 sleep that you're getting in. Now, there's a bit of a disclaimer for this. If you are still 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years of age, then that may not affect you. as much. But once we start getting into our mid to late 20s and beyond, that's when we need to start getting earlier sleep. And the reason that is because we're starting to see research that is showing teenagers' natural circadian rhythm actually starts at midnight. So it's actually better for teenagers and kids in their earlier 20s to really start looking at going to bed at 11 at midnight and waking up at 8 or 9 versus 10 o'clock getting up at 6 or 7. So it's kind of interesting research that's out there. And there's some researchers that are actually suggesting that we relook at high school times, because high school times are not ideal for learning for kids because of their natural circadian rhythm. Their adenosine doesn't really start kicking in until 11:30, 12 o'clock. Their circadian rhythm really doesn't start dropping until 11, 12 o'clock. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to think about. And you guys are, slowly moving out of that stage in life now, where you need to start thinking about going to bed a little bit earlier, because your adenosine and your circadian rhythm is going to change as you get into your 20s. But one thing we do need to note is that stage 3 occurs earlier in the night, and it is the most important part of sleep, because that is where we're growing, repairing, replenishing. If you're an athlete and you're training hard and you're breaking down your muscles, that stage is when we're going to see the repair for those muscles. So the greater amount of stage 3 sleep, the less sore an athlete might be, the better they can perform. Then we get into REM stage. This is the famous rapid eye movement. And it's called the REM's rapid eye movement because our eyes rapidly move during this stage. Our muscles are relaxed, and we're more likely to remember dreams at this point. REM sleep typically accounts for 20 to 25% of all sleep, but that does actually reduce as we get older. As we move closer to waking, we are in REM sleep. More than the other 3 stages. So as we get later on into the night, early morning, closer to wake up time, we're more in REM sleep. Now, during REM sleep, our breathing actually becomes more regular in this stage, and our blood pressure and our heart rate are much higher. It could be due to the dream aspect. It could be due to the fact that we're starting to wake up. But definitely, it's the highest point in terms of breathing and heart rate and blood pressure during sleep. Now, research is suggesting that the first 2 sleep cycles are crucial, and getting them as early in the night as possible has a lot of value, especially younger kids that are growing. So I'm talking about pre-adolescents. Their sleep stage, their circadian rhythm is actually 8, 7, 8, starts at 7, 8, 9 o'clock and goes until 7, 8 o'clock the next day. Pre-adolescents, babies, they need up to anywhere from 11 to 14 hours of sleep per night for their growth and development. Now, when it comes to the cycles, and what we've talked about, because we've talked about adenosine when it's produced, circadian rhythm, sleep cycle. There's something I wanted to talk about that I mentioned about, and it's an evolutionary principle, and it's early birds versus night owls. Because a lot of you right now are probably like, oh yeah, I'm done at 10 o'clock and I'm going to bed. I'm up at 6 or 7 and good to go. And other views are like, I'm up till midnight and I feel good until midnight and I'm most productive till midnight. And, I go to bed and get up at 7, 8 and I feel great. And it's actually, that's an evolutionary principle in terms of sleep. So as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about sleep, it's essentially losing consciousness, and it could be a very dangerous aspect for hunter-gatherers. Well, in the hunter-gatherers, what they actually did was they had people they had parts of their tribe that would go to bed earlier and wake up earlier the next day, and other parts of their tribes that went to bed later and woke up later in the day. So obviously they didn't really have they didn't have time at that point. They just went by it's dark and it's light, so they slept based on sundown and sun up. So they would have some of their tribe, mainly this is all theorized, mainly the women and the children, and some of the more stronger members of the tribe would go to bed right at sundown. So as soon as sundown, they went to sleep. And then another group of tribe members, mainly the stronger of the hunters, would stay up later. Obviously, I can't give you a time frame, but they would stay up later until they fell asleep. And then, of course, they'd wake up later. And then the group that woke up or went to bed earlier wakes up. Not shortly after, but some point. I would say probably, if we look at our time frame, probably 4 or 5 hours after the other group went to sleep. So the reason for that was to essentially make sure that the tribe was not vulnerable. They were only vulnerable for a short period of time versus a long period of time. Sundown to sun up, everyone was sleeping. So we had a group that went to bed at sundown. We had a group that went to bed later on after sundown to try and limit the vulnerability of the tribe. So that actually evolved through our ancestors into who we are now. So if you are like, I'm a night owl, well, there's actually a reason. There's an evolutionary reason of why you're a night owl and an evolutionary reason of why you're an early bird. Right? So I always thought that's a really interesting hypothesis in terms of evolution and sleep and why some people are, go to bed late and some go to bed early because it's completely of evolution. And another interesting aspect of sleep too is, science says 7 to 9 hours of sleep. But a research study recently actually showed there is a very, very small percentage of the population that actually can work effectively off 6 hours of sleep. Now, before you're like, that's me. Yeah, I'm told I only need 6 hours. I'm good. The chances of you being one of those people is the same as one of you getting struck by lightning. So it's very rare. It's very rare, but it is possible. And I just wanted to share that. So physiology of sleep, we looked at circadian rhythm, we looked at adenosine, we talked about the different stages. Now there's one other aspect that we need to talk about, and a lot of you probably know and have heard of this before, and that's melatonin. So what is melatonin? Because I think melatonin is actually one of those aspects that is grossly misunderstood in our society. Because people actually think that melatonin can help you sleep. They use it as a sleep aid. All right? So melatonin is a hormone, and its nickname is the hormone of darkness. And the reason why is because melatonin is released from the pineal gland in the back of the brain into the bloodstream, and it happens shortly after dusk. So as soon as the sun starts to go down, we start getting melatonin being released. Now, the primary job of this hormone is to alert your body that it's dark outside, because you see that it's dark outside, your brain sees that it's dark outside, but in reality, your body doesn't know that. So this hormone is released by the brain seeing that it's getting dark to tell the rest of your body that it's time to sleep. So melatonin's main principle is to regulate the timing of sleep. So it does this by systemically signaling darkness throughout the organisms. So melatonin actually has very little influence on the generation of sleep. And this is the mistaken assumption by many, and why melatonin is actually used as a sleeping aid. But in reality, it's not actually an effective sleeping aid. The only time it's effective sleeping aid is if you're jet lagged and you're trying to get your circadian rhythm back and your melatonin is a little bit thrown off. Even then, the best way of doing it is just letting it naturally go. So it's interesting because a lot of people, as I said, they'll use melatonin as a sleep aid, but in reality, it's not. And there's actually research that shows that melatonin is actually more effective as a placebo. So essentially, melatonin just makes people think that they can go to bed earlier, and it makes them go to bed earlier. So you can literally give somebody a sugar pill. Well, maybe not a sugar pill. We don't want to get their energy up. You can literally give somebody a pill and say, this is melatonin. It'll help you sleep. They'll take it, and it will psychologically help them sleep, not physiologically, which is important to note. So melatonin actually regulates itself by light, as I mentioned. So as you're sleeping, melatonin will slowly decrease as soon as dawn hits your eyelids. Then that pineal gland will stop releasing the hormone. So that's the truth about melatonin. And again, it's something that everyone should know. So now that we have a little bit of an understanding of the physiology of sleep, we have an understanding of what exactly is happening, why we need to go to sleep, you know, the importance of the stages, how it helps growth and development, how it helps motor learning. Sleep is, you know, the physiology of sleep is quite amazing. Now, a lot of the times, lack of sleep, sleep deprivation, that's caused by us. That's not caused by physiology, right? There's definitely some physical aspects that can create insomnia, right? If you take my 3303 strength and conditioning course, we'll talk about overtraining, overreaching, which can actually lead to lack of sleep. So what we'll look at now is the psychological and somewhat physical barriers that we create ourselves. So what we need to ask ourselves is, what are your barriers? And then subtract those barriers to automatically improve your sleep. So one of the biggest barriers that we have in terms of sleep is caffeine. Caffeine is really the most widely used and abused psychoactive stimulant in the world right now. Caffeine, we have to understand, is a drug. In fact, it's the most widely used and abused stimulant in the world, as I mentioned, but also it is the second most traded commodity on the planet after oil. So many of us, we look at our morning coffee, we don't look at it as a drug, we just look at it as a pick-me-up, right? But what's actually happening is our morning coffee is boosting our energy, but also creating an addiction. But when it comes to sleep, it's covering up the drowsy feeling that results from poor sleep. So one thing we need to understand too about caffeine is it's a chemical that we use to mute the sleep signal. So when it comes to caffeine, it actually does the opposite of what adenosine is, and it blocks adenosine. So it mutes that tiredness, and it makes us feel more alert. So in simple terms, caffeine compensates, in simple terms, the caffeine we take competes with adenosine for receptor sites in the brain. So when caffeine is in the brain, it's taking up the receptor sites that adenosine would generally attach to make us feel drowsy. So it's the opposite of adenosine. And once caffeine latches onto that receptor site, it does not make us feel sleepy. So it's a masking agent. Now, another thing it comes to caffeine, and if we look at the world of pharmacology, there is a term called half-life. Now, half-life is the amount of time it takes for the body to eliminate half of the substance from your system. Now, caffeine has a half-life of 5 to 7 hours, which means that if you have a coffee at 2 p.m., there is still half of the caffeine circulating in your system by 7 to 9 p.m. And that's when you should start feeling sleepy. So it blocks the natural effect of adenosine and that sleep pressure, and it can stop you from feeling tired. Now, if we're taking caffeine after 2, then what's happening is it's blocking that sleep pressure at the point where we need it most, which is when we're trying to prepare to sleep. Now, another thing to think about with caffeine too is if we have it at 2 and only half of it is out of our system, and we do happen to fall asleep at 10 or 11, there's still caffeine in our system while we're sleeping. Now, that's going to affect our quality of sleep because, as I mentioned in the physiology of sleep, our heart rate drops. Well, if you have caffeine in your system, your heart rate accelerates. So it's not going to drop to the point where we need to get for stage 3 or REM sleep. So one thing I want to make clear, there's nothing wrong with a cup of coffee in the morning. Obviously, we all like coffee, but we need to understand the function of it and how we can really optimize our use of caffeine. So my suggestion is enjoy your cup of coffee, but try to have it early. Make sure that you understand that if you have it later on the day, you are actually going to decrease your quality of sleep, which is going to really impact how you feel during the day. So when it comes to coffee, what is your relationship with it? Can you not function without it? Because if you can't function optimally without caffeine before noon, then you are most likely self-medicating your state of chronic sleep deprivation. So one thing I always suggest to people is have the discipline to hold yourself to a caffeine curfew. I personally have eliminated caffeine completely from my life. But before that, and what I suggest to people is to try to have it before 11 a.m. If you can have it before 11 a.m. and that's it, then you shouldn't have any consequences of disrupting your evening sleep then. But you need to really talk about your relationship with caffeine. Are you having 4 to 5 cups a day to survive? If you are, evaluate why that is. Chances are you're tired because you're not sleeping enough. If you get enough sleep, honestly, you shouldn't need caffeine. You shouldn't need caffeine. I have been without caffeine for, I think it's about 2 years now. And I get 7, 8 hours of sleep a night, and I do not feel tired during the day. I'm ready for a good night's sleep in the evening. It helps with my preparation for sleep. It improves my sleep quality. And it's just a matter of identifying your relationship with it. If you enjoy coffee, by all means, have some. But try to have a curfew. That is the best suggestion you can give yourself or people you're working with. Now, another thing I want to talk about caffeine is because, like I said, it is a stimulant. It is the wildly most used and abused drug in our society. But there actually is a lot of other side effects with it, especially when we have too much of it. All right. As a drug, you will go through withdrawals when you have it. But it also, as much as it can stimulate you, it can really scatter you. Now, one of my favorite studies of all times is this study here, which looked at spider webs of a spider on various drugs. So you can see here, we look at a spider web done by a spider that is not on any type of drug. Then we have a spider that is on LSD, one that is on marijuana, one that is on speed, and then one that is on caffeine. Look at the worst spider web of all 5 of those. It's the one on caffeine. I find the marijuana one interesting because it looks like it's half done. If you ask me, that is the definition of marijuana, half done. Because most people get to the point where they're just unmotivated to finish. LSD one looks pretty cool, but it's not complete. And the speed one is sporadic. But the caffeine one just is scattered. So it's interesting about caffeine and what it can do. And when we get into nutrition, we'll look at caffeine in a little bit more detail. But I just wanted to focus on caffeine within being a sleep barrier. Now, another sleep barrier we have is sleeping pills. Sleeping pills are wildly used by doctors to help people with sleep conditions. Now, sleeping pills is pretty consistent with the way modern medicine treats other diseases by targeting symptoms and not the root cause. Sleeping pills have become alarmingly prevalent in the modern age, and this acts as a major indicator of epidemic of sleep problems we're facing. Although this topic will be something to expand on in future, especially when it comes to research, the most important elements to understand are that sleeping pills do not provide natural sleep. So if we're not providing ourselves with natural sleep, this is going to damage our health. It's going to increase the risk of life-threatening diseases. Because what's happening is, again, we're not getting the quality of sleep that we need. We're not naturally going through the cycle and stages of sleep. So a key piece of information with sleep drugs is they are sedatives and not tools to induce natural sleep. Superficial sedation and sleep might seem to be the same thing. They both look the same from the outside. You're unconscious. But looking deeper into brain activity patterns reveals they are in fact extremely different. Natural sleep carries with it very detailed and active brain signatures, which come from the functions happening during natural sleep, like memory consolidation, as well as maintenance. We're starting to see that sleep and dreams is actually helping with PTSD patients, and that REM sleep actually improves people's PTSD. But you're not going to get that with sleeping pills. Now, sedation, it does not show a similar pattern, which indicates that none of the harmful functions and benefits of a natural sleep are happening when you're sedated. So probably why so many people that take sleeping medications suffer side effects like next day grogginess, daytime forgetfulness, slowed reaction times during the day. Because you're not allowing your brain and your body to optimize its much needed sleep. Sleeping pills are immensely common, but we can't mistake sedation for sleep, and these pills are yet another example of treating a deeply rooted problem with a quick fix that might end up doing much more harm than good in the long term. So we really want to try to avoid sleeping pills. Come up with what's really causing the problem with sleep deprivation, and try and improve sleep naturally before we move into sleeping pills. Another barrier I want to talk about is alcohol. Alcohol and sleep. Alcohol will disrupt optimal sleep. Alcohol is a drug so deeply ingrained. It's a drug that is so deeply ingrained in our modern society that it's hard to find a social event where alcohol isn't served. Alcohol belongs to a class of drugs called sedatives. So much like the sleeping pills. So what happens is they're able to cross the blood-brain barrier and bind to receptors in the brain that prevents neurons from firing optimally. Though alcohol, when consumed in large volumes, will sedate you, we must not confuse sedation with sleep, as I already talked about in the last slide. They are very different things. Alcohol will disrupt optimal sleep in two ways. It fragments it. It scatters you. So we have scattered awakings disrupted with continuity of sleep, which is required in order to be restorative. It suppresses REM sleep. So the metabolism of alcohol in the body produces aldehydes, which block the ability of the brain to generate our REM sleep. So alcohol might seem like an innocent drug, much like caffeine, because it's widely used. But we must be aware that when we are hungover, it's not only a consequence of a night of drinking, but it's also a negative effect on sleep. And it actually is going to be harmful in the long term. So again, much like caffeine, with alcohol, we have to really look at what our relationship with alcohol is, right? Why are we drinking it? When are we drinking it? Alcohol is just like anything else. We need to make sure we moderate it. A moderate amount is fine. But if we're drinking to the point where we are regularly passing out, we are affecting our sleep immensely. And we should realize that. Another barrier to think about is light. Now, this is interesting because light obviously is something that is different in some ways. We have our natural light, which comes from the sun. We also have our engineered light that comes from things like TV, light bulbs, and cell phones. So humans have really evolved in sync with the environment that we inhabited for millions of years, and the planet's light dark cycles have ancestrally played a large role in regulating when and how we sleep. With the invention of artificial light and the transition to build environment and culture, it has changed, and so has our relationship with light. We are now underexposed to sunlight during the day and overexposed to artificial light later in the evening. Straying from our ancestral alignment with light has created problems for our sleep behaviors, and optimizing sleep starts with understanding how can we restore our relationship with light-dark cycle by creating a natural habitat. So one thing we need to realize is too much light in the evening can negatively affect our ability to sleep. But lack of sunlight during the day can also have a negative impact on our overall sleep cycle timing. So we need to make sure we get a routine where we get sunlight, especially in the morning, without sunglasses on. And that will help give us a dose of vitamin D, but will also receive a natural boost in waking up, and will help make sure that our circadian rhythm is tuned so our body can naturally be ready for sleep again at night. So really, it's a matter of waking ourselves up by looking at light, the sun specifically, or natural light. So when it comes to too much light, that's going to be problematic. Now, too much light usually comes from screens, and you've probably heard of blue light. And blue light is really impacting people's screens. So we're being surrounded by portable and advanced electronics all the time, and they contain these high-resolution LED screens, and it's extremely recent phenomenon, right? For most of you, you've probably have lived with understanding of phones and iPads and laptops and televisions. But really, it's not, in the grand scheme of the world, it hasn't been around for very long. So this constant availability of these devices and the instant access to novelty and entertainment has caught us off guard. And it's affecting our sleep tremendously. So since the inception of widely available artificial life, humans have been able to circumvent the normal planetary cycle of light and dark. The loss of daylight is what informs our release of melatonin. As we talked about already, artificial light then puts an end to optimal function of the signaling pathways and it has created a major obstacle for us getting to sleep. Screens before bedtime essentially tricks your brain into thinking the sun has not set and prevents the release of the melatonin, which, as we mentioned, helps regulate sleep cycles. And therefore, it's going to create a roadblock to sleep onset. It's going to impact your stages. It's going to impact your quality. So blue lights, cell phones, can really cause a problem. And in the survey, I put that question. I put 2 questions involving your phone. First, do you look at your phone or look at a screen leading up to bed? A high percentage of you have said yes. Now, what you need to understand is that is creating a melatonin delay because your brain isn't releasing it to help regulate the stages because it doesn't think it's dark. So there is a trick, there is a biohack that you can do with your phone to help regulate blue light. You can buy blue light glasses, which you wear while you're on your phone or watching TV. That will help essentially decrease that artificial light getting into your brain. The second thing you can do is try to essentially give yourself a device break leading up to bed. 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever it might be. I know as students it's hard because you're doing a lot of work. So always with students, I always suggest get the blue light glasses. You get them on Amazon, they'll help. Now, the other question that I asked you guys was how many people charge their phone beside them or on their nightstand or even in their room? I said just beside them on the nightstand for the survey. Again, a large percentage of you do that. Now, this isn't going to affect anything in terms of your light, the light factor and the melatonin, because it should be off. If you leave the phone on and you get notifications, then that obviously could wake you up and affect your quality of sleep. But for the most part, it creates a psychological problem. And it's recent research that's been done on the psychological problem that's really interesting. And what essentially the research is showing is that when we sleep with our phones in our room, our subconscious knows that. It knows our phone is there. And with the amount of information that is brought to our phone on a daily basis, our subconscious is getting to the point now where we are constantly wondering what's happening next. Or we're afraid we're missing out, in fear of missing out. And when we sleep with our phone beside us, we actually psychologically go through the fear of missing out. And it's showing that we're starting to wake up earlier because we're worried about what we've missed during that 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So that's one thing I suggest is sleep away from your phone. Get your phone out of your room. Don't have it in your room at all when you sleep. If you need to, if you have a small living area and you need to have it in the room that you sleep in, don't put it beside you and turn your notifications off. I don't have very many notifications on at all during the day, because I believe that notifications are alarms that other people set for you. And I don't want to be woken up from a notification. And in this case, I'm sitting here doing a lecture. I don't want a notification alerting me something and taking my attention off of this lecture. So that's a couple things to note about phones and lights and how it affects your sleep. So those are some barriers. Those are really the major barriers to sleep problem. So let's look at how we improve our sleep. What are some things we can do to help get a better quality 7 to 9 hours of sleep? So really, a good night's sleep starts with engineering an environment that promotes sleep. The environment that we create and the things that we do in our bedroom can have a significant effect on the patterning of our brain for sleep and for other aspects of health. So what we need to do is turn our bedroom into a sleep sanctuary. Really, that's the best thing to do. A system that lets us reach our goals without having to think about it. So here are the key elements to help optimize our sleep environment. First off, temperature. If possible, we want to have our bedroom cool. So when it's time for us to rest, we have an immediate drop in our body temperature, and that helps initiate sleep. So if we can keep our bedroom cool around 18 degrees Celsius at night, this will actually help optimize our sleep. So if it's possible to keep it at 18, then that's what you should do it. Personally, I like to have it even a little cooler. I find that helps my sleep. Right? I get the best sleep in wintertime when I can just, it's cold and I just sleep right through the night, and it's fantastic. Right? But research is showing 18 degrees Celsius is optimal. Screens, cell phones, television, desktop computers, laptops, iPads, Kindles. So many fun toys, but so many potential obstacles to sleep. And we take them into our bedroom. So to be simple, matter of fact, to get right to the point, a true sleep environment should contain no screens. That's even including an alarm clock, especially an alarm clock that's right in your face. So make it a rule to eliminate all screens before bed in your bedroom and have the discipline to hold yourself to it. It will make a huge difference. Darkness. Humans sleep better in dark environments. It's a test of time. But today's age, as I've mentioned, we are being overwhelmed with artificial light. So we can create total darkness in our bedroom. And it's something that we should try to do in terms of engineering our sleep environment. Make it as dark as possible. Get blackout blinds. Whatever you need to do. So what you want to really do with your sleep environment is you want to create a sleep mindset. And you want to align your complete mindset to it. So when you step into that environment, that sleep sanctuary, you want to make sure you're acting like you're stepping into a sacred space. A space that has expectations that your behaviors, including your actions, tone of voice, interactions with others, all are aligned with what you want to accomplish in terms of sleep. Create and reinforce that space. Make it a relaxed place, a calm place, a place of tranquility. Create this environment that brings your mind to a place that is ready for sleep. It might sound silly, but to some, it can make a massive difference. And it could really help with a good night's sleep. Now, another thing that could help sleep is physical activity. We're going to talk about physical activity coming up, and we're going to see all the tremendous benefits of physical activity. Well, if we do enough physical activity during the day to make yourself physically exhausted by the time you hit the pillow, that's a great sleep enhancer. Now, the problem is movement is optional in our day-to-day life. Ancestrally, it was mandatory for survival. Now we have the option if we want to be sedentary for the majority of the day. We don't need to use up our daily reserve of energy. And we can sometimes really be left with a full tank before we go to bed. And that obviously is going to negatively impact our ability to fall asleep. Because we're going to have all this energy that's running through our system, creating ATP. So if we can be physically active enough during the day, that will help sleep. Now, we want to make sure that physical activity ideally shouldn't be done within 2 to 3 hours of bedtime because it does make it a little bit harder to sleep if we work out prior to sleep. But it definitely helps during the day, especially to empty the tank and then you'll get a really good night's sleep out of it. Last lecture, I mentioned how one of the best ways to evaluate how things work is by looking at kids and observing kids. And again, when I observe my kids, when it comes to sleep, if they don't get enough physical activity during the day, it is obvious because they have a hard time sleeping. They literally have so much energy because that they didn't burn. Way to look at kids is it's like they have a movement bank. And if you want your kids to sleep well during the night, they need to empty that movement bank every day. And if they empty that movement bank, they'll get a good night's sleep. And while they're sleeping, they will regenerate that movement bank and they will increase their bank account again for the next day. But if they are not emptying that movement bank and they're going to sleep, their body will be affected. Their sleep will be affected. And it's harmful. That's why the recommendation for kids is, I think, 60 minutes a day. And honestly, I don't think that's enough for kids. I think kids need to move 75% of the day in order to empty their movement bank. 60 minutes isn't enough. They need a lot of movement. Now, another great way to improve your sleep is by creating a bedtime routine. If you're a parent or if you have a young niece or nephew or brother or sister, you probably understand the value of a pre-bedtime routine. It helps wind children down before they go to sleep. Often that pre-bedtime routine for kids is bath, reading a book, singing a song. And it's all used to help prepare their little minds for an evening of sound sleep. But what a lot of people don't realize is what's true for children is also true for adults. But we, for some reason, forget to apply the same intuitive logic to prepare ourselves for sleep. So when it comes to sleep preparation, a routine is a great habit to create. It will help the mind relax. It will help the body calm down and regulate into the parasympathetic state that will prepare us for optimal transition into sleep and recovery. So whether it's writing a book, writing down notes for the next day, meditation, breath work, creating a sleep prep ritual can be a powerful element in improving sleep. So what I want to end with today is 12 tips for healthy sleep. Now, this is from Medline Plus, and it gives you a solid 12 tips to a better sleep. So when we look at this, the first thing, and it's really the most important tip of all, and it's one I just mentioned, you want to stick to a sleep schedule. You want a routine when it comes to sleep. That is going to optimize your sleep more than anything. You want to try to go to bed and wake up at the same time each day. Most of us probably set an alarm every day if we need to get up early. Ideally, if we can stick to a schedule, our alarm won't need to be set because our body will naturally wake up when it's supposed to if we stick to a schedule. I know as college students, it's really hard to stick to a schedule, but as you get older and as you get into your career, it's easier and it should be done. Step 2, do not exercise 2 to 3 hours before your bedtime. The reason why is because it elevates your heart rate. It takes your heart a little bit to come back down to resting after exercise. So if you work out 30 minutes before going to sleep, chances are your heart rate is going to not be slow enough to get you to sleep right away. And that can create some insomnia and it can create some difficult time to get to sleep. Avoid caffeine and nicotine. Both stimulants, both affect our sleep. Avoid alcohol drinks before bed. As we mentioned, it's a sedative. It will affect your sleep. Alcohol should be moderate. Avoid large meals and beverages late at night. The reason why you want to avoid beverages late at night is due to the fact that it could wake you up to have to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And it says avoid large meals before bed or late at night. I personally, any food I would avoid before sleep. I will talk about fasting and the principles of fasting and creating a eating schedule or a eating time frame when we get into nutrition. But some of the research I'm starting to see is if we are eating right up to bedtime, then our sleep is not going to be optimized because our body's going to be doing two things. It's going to be trying to recover while we sleep, but it's also going to be trying to be digesting. So what's going to happen is the body is going to have to prioritize energy based on two things: regeneration, recovery during sleep, digestion of food while we sleep. So I try to stop eating at 5:30. It's dinner's at 5:30. As soon as I'm finished eating dinner, I don't eat anything until I break my fast the next day, which is breakfast. But we'll talk about that when we get into nutrition. Avoid medicines that could that could delay or disrupt your sleep. That's something that if you have medicines that affect your sleep, you need to discuss with your doctor. Don't take naps after 3 o'clock. Naps are beneficial. There is plenty of research now that shows that napping actually can decrease your risk of cardiovascular disease. It can enhance mental function. It can enhance retention. Lots can happen when we sleep. When we take naps. But if we take a nap after 3 p.m., it's going to be harder to fall asleep because it is going to affect our cycles and our adenosine. One of the best things to do is relax before bed. Have some sort of routine that relaxes your mind and body before bed. That is going to help. Now, this tip here, take a hot shower or hot bath or shower before bed. That one is, again, just to calm ourselves down, warm our body up a little bit, and get ready to go into sleep. But I'm starting to see research that is showing cold water immersion is actually enhancing sleep more than anything else. So by actually going and dipping yourself into cold water for a short period of time, 5-10 minutes, if you can handle it, enhances sleep quality. Create that dark, cool, screen-free bedroom environment. I think that is one of the most crucial factors too. You want to try and get at least 30 minutes of natural sunlight exposure during the day and try to get sunlight first thing in the morning after waking up. The reason why is because that's going to completely alter and help your circadian rhythm. It's going to help identify melatonin. It's going to help your adenosine produce properly because as soon as you see the light in the morning, it's telling your circadian rhythm that it's morning, and it will help really balance your day. Now, another thing you should try to not do is lie in bed awake. If after 20 minutes you're in bed and you're still awake, you're still having a hard time falling asleep, get up and do some sort of relaxing activity until you feel sleepy. Whether that relaxing activity is reading a book or doing a light stretch, just whatever relaxes you, and try and do it till you feel sleepy, and it might help. I do breath work. If I'm having a hard time falling asleep, I do some nasal breathing, breathe in through my nose, out through my nose, really focus on getting the breath in through my diaphragm, and I find it calms me down and it helps me go to sleep. All right. Okay, everyone. I hope you got as much out of this lecture as I was hoping everyone would. I hope you understand a little bit more the benefits of sleep, the physiology of sleep, the barriers we create for ourselves in sleep, and some useful tips to help us sleep. Like I said, I want you to use this on yourself. But more importantly, as you become health professionals, I want you to apply it to the people that you're working with. Help people identify and have a better relationship with sleep. As I said, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, one of the best sleep resources I've ever seen. I'm going to post that lecture up, or that chapter up on Brightspace so you guys can read it. I think it's a beneficial lecture or chapter for students because it shows you how you can improve your retention while you sleep. All right. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. And if you're going to sleep, have a good night's sleep.